With that, let us enter into the Gospel of Mark. Now, when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites. As it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition.'" Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you. Understand. There is nothing outside of a person that by going in can defile. But the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile."
Let us pray. O Lord, may your words only be spoken and your words only heard. We do ask this all for your love's precious sake. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Well, everybody loves a good curse, don't they? Okay, if not a good curse, then at least a good curse story. Because our culture, and in fact all human cultures, are full of curse stories. And they'll immediately begin to come to mind when I suggest what we're talking about. Cinderella and Snow White and Rumpelstiltskin. The mummy, the curse of the mummy, and a werewolf, the curse of whatever. The evil eye, American folklore, the evil eye that puts a curse on somebody. Where our culture is just filled with curse stories. And perhaps the oldest, or certainly one of the oldest, and one of the most profound curse stories of all is actually found in the Bible. And it's found at the very start of the Bible. You'll remember that the Bible starts with God, as you might expect, God making the world a great and beautiful place to be, a place that is very, very good. He puts people in the world. People do all right at the start, but pretty soon they make a bad decision. And as is the case with every bad decision, it has bad consequences. This is not tisk, 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 shame, 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 but it's that the consequences of decision are hurtful, destructive. They keep the garden from being all that it could be. So they make this bad decision. This bad decision has bad consequences. Those bad consequences get summed up, encapsulated in a curse. And that curse is sometimes called the Edenic curse, the Garden of Eden being in there, the Adamic curse, seen in the covenant that God made with Adam. But this curse has several features. The first is they're thrown out of the garden. So there's this place that's filled with flowers and vines and fragrance, and they're thrown out. And now it's thistles and thorns and pain and sorrow. Relationships are impacted. And we're told that in relationship, what's going to happen is that now very often relationships are going to be characterized by one person being more interested in their partner than the other. And you can think of how that happens in so very many relationships, both in the romantic process. Oftentimes it's one person running after another and the other person not being quite as interested. But even in long-term relationships like marriages. I mean, very often, even in marriages, there'll be one partner who is far more interested in the other partner, and the other partner is distracted or busy or something else and just really isn't as interested in the one person as the other. And all the pain that causes. One person being really interested in another person, not so much. And then another impact of relationships is we're told that men will dominate women. And interestingly, some churches pick that up and say men are supposed to dominate women. In the biblical story, that's actually part of the curse. That's not the way that God wanted it to be from the beginning. So this is part of the curse. And then, of course, it's a curse that's lived out and often lived out in marriages, that men see it as their right and duty to dominate women. But again, let's be crystal clear, in the biblical understanding of things, that's not what God intends. That's the curse that comes from a bad decision, all right? And then it's going to impact work. And for many people, for many of us, work will be soul-crushing, frustrating, and exercise in frustration. We somehow feel like it's separated from the best and highest and holiest part of us, just something we have to do so that we can get to the things that we really want to do. And what we really want to do often is not our work. And so this is the curse. And what's interesting is there is a book in the Old Testament that talks about the undoing of that curse. And that book happens to be the Song of Songs. And if you were to take out your bulletin insert, you will notice that the first reading is actually from the Song of Songs. Last week, I encouraged you to read the book of Ephesians, meditate on the armor of God, what that means, how that's important to us. This week, I'd encourage you to read the Song of Songs. This is the only reading we have from it during all 3 of our church years. It's an important book, and we're going to see why. And it's also a very interesting book. It has some sizzle to it. So I think you'll enjoy reading it. But in this book, as we said, the curse is reversed. And so in this book, people aren't out amongst the thistles and thorns, and you see this already in this first reading, but they're back in the garden. So this whole book takes place in the context of a lush, verdant garden. And towards the end of today's reading, it talks about the fig tree blossoming, the vines growing up with flowers all over them, and fragrance filling the air. So again, this being thrown out of the garden, being placed back in the garden. In this book, it's not a book about dominance. Nobody is dominating anybody else, but it's about mutuality. And in this book, women have a strong and beautiful voice. In fact, women participate in every major dialogue in this book, and often have the dominant voice in that, or not the dominant voice, but have an important voice in that dialogue. And so it's marked by nobody's trying to dominate anybody else. It's a mutuality. And the book's about dialogue. Not about anybody telling anybody else the way it's going to be, anybody having to have the last word, anybody having to win. It's this dialogue back and forth. And the woman's voice is every bit as important as the man's voice. And the woman's not shy or demure. She knows what she wants, and in a beautiful way, she says, I'd like to have that. These people are faithful to each other. They have eyes only for each other. Again, this wandering that's introduced in the curse, people get distracted, wander. There's this faithfulness that comes to their ardor for each other. And they say they only, and we have every reason to believe it's true, they only have eyes for each other. Now, just a little interjection here, men. You know, one of the things men say is, hey, you know what, it's okay to look at the menu as long as they don't buy the food. That is as foreign to the thinking of this book of Song of Songs as could be. The writer of the Song of Songs, both the man and the woman, say, I only have eyes for my beloved. And men, you may be aware that one of the things that is spoken of is the male gaze. And in the day and age in which we live, a lot of women have made a choice to live free from the male gaze because they realize it's such a thing. What does it feel like to be known as such a creature that we lecherously and desiring look at women? And women are well aware of how we look at them, so aware of how we look at them that it is a recognized thing. Pretty awful if you really think about it. Wouldn't you like to be known for something different? I'd like to be known for something different. Only having eyes for my beloved. Think of the implications of that. That in and of itself is a powerful, powerful thing. So it reverses that curse, and then work isn't this grim skull drudgery, but the book is just filled with delight. It's just filled through and through. Page after page is just this exercise in delight. So the other interesting thing about this book is there's somebody who never shows up in this book. One of only 2 books in the Bible where this is the case. The other one is the book of Esther. Who doesn't show up in this book? God. God is never mentioned in the Song of Songs. Oh, maybe God is. Because love is mentioned. And the Bible tells us that one of the names for God, the name that most beautifully and fully captures who's God, is love. And so God does show up in this book just by another name, and it's God showing up in human love, because that's what this book is about, human love. That is what reverses the curse. Jesus will pick up on this in today's gospel when he talks about it's not anything that comes into a person that defiles them, but it's what comes out of them. It's a matter of the heart. When the heart is right with God and the heart is right with one another, then there's nothing that can make us unclean. And when our heart is out of whack with God, or our heart's out of whack with the people who are around us, then there's nothing that can make us clean. No matter what songs we sing, no matter what else we do, we're going to be defiled. It's a matter of the heart. And Jesus will continue to develop this in so much of his life and teachings. It will culminate in the story he tells about the sheep and goats. It was a picture of Judgment Day. And on this day, it's going to talk about those who enter into the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of Kevin, the kingdom of heaven, and those who don't. And those who enter into the kingdom of heaven are those who do the work of love. And it's his work of love depicted in loving human beings. It's as depicted in the book of the Song of Songs that reverses the curse. This is the work of the kingdom, reversing the curse so that what is lost is restored, what is broken is healed, and that what has been set apart is reconciled. And the great work of God, the building of the kingdom, is sometimes called the reconciliation of all things. What an important work to do. What is it that reconciles all things? It is the work of love. And so these people enter into the kingdom because they entered the kingdom a long time ago when they decided to do the work and reverse the curse. And the other people don't enter into the kingdom of heaven, even though they sing about it, even though they talk about it, even though they think about it, even though they strategize about it. They don't enter into the kingdom of heaven because they turned their back a long time ago when, even though they thought about all these things, they never did them. They didn't actually do the works of love. And it just so happens that we're very fortunate that this month, this is our Link month. Link is one of the ways that we feed hungry families in the area, and so we sign up. September is St. Matthew's month. People in our family, my wife and Lisa Lintelman signed up for this week, for instance, a night this week, and so they'll come, go to Link Pantry, pick up food, go to 2 or 3 houses, deliver that food, perhaps visit with the families, maybe even if families are receptive to it, say a prayer with them, and this is a way of doing the work of love, a very important way of doing the work, putting what we're talking about into practice. But the question that this raises for us, and this is if the work of love is so important, if it's how we do the work of God and build God's kingdom and enter into God's kingdom, if it's that which reverses the effects of the curse, how do we live in love? And I want to tell you a story about that. And this story comes from a book called Love Does by Bob Goff. And several of us heard Bob Goff speak years ago at a leadership conference. And do you remember him? And he wrote this book, and I liked what he had to say in the conference, but he struck me as a little bit of a loon, so I never read the book. I couldn't warm up to the book. My wife read the book, said it was great, and I said, But then just recently I saw her reading it again, and she said, boy, this book is even better than I remember it. And she read me a section of a chapter, which just really got my interest, so I said, you know what, I'm going to read that book. And I did, and it is one great book. You should read this book. Bob Goff, Love Does, simple. You can read it in an afternoon or an evening, which is, say, a matter of hours. But it is an inspiring book. He tells one of these stories, and in this story, Bob Goff, was in high school, and he's not very good at high school, even though he's going to go on to be a lawyer, a very successful lawyer. At this point in time, he's failing in school. And so he decides he's going to drop out of high school. He's in California, and he decides that his dream, I think like most Californians, right, is to drop out of high school and go to Yosemite, live in Yosemite, work in the morning, climb all day long. Amen. Yeah, there you go. That's exactly right. El Capitan, Half Dome, all the others. That's life in Mecca. That's Mecca. Yeah, there you go. And so while he's in high school, there's a guy that shows up at their high school. This guy's name is Randy. Randy has a beard and a motorcycle, which Bob thinks is really cool, but obviously he's not a high schooler. He wonders what he's doing there. Turns out this is a Young Life guy, and so he's come to high school to make some friends with some kids and invite them into Young Life so that he can introduce them into a relationship with Jesus. And he looks at Bob, he looks at Randy and feels sort of sorry for Randy. He says he must not have any friends his own age. That's why he's doing this. He has no interest in Jesus whatsoever, and no positive associations with Jesus either. Just thinks, Jesus is sort of for losers. So he feels sorry for Randy, and he allows Randy to be his friend, all right? And he and Randy sort of develop this friendship. So when he decides to leave high school at the end of his junior year, on his way out of town, he decides he'll drop by Randy's house and let Randy know that he's doing this. So he knocks on Randy's, it's a Sunday morning, knocks on Randy's door. Randy's opened the door, he's sort of disheveled, bed hair head, and he says, Randy, it's time to make my dream come true. I'm dropping out of high school, I'm going out to Yosemite, I'm going to work in the mornings, climb all day. It'll be a beautiful thing. Randy just kind of looks at him, puzzled, doesn't say anything. You can see him trying to figure all this. And then he says, well, you mean like right now? And Bob sticks out his chest and says, yeah, right now, man, time to make my dream happen. And Randy says, well, give me a minute. I need to check something out. So he goes back into a back room. It's a few minutes. Bob's standing awkwardly on the porch. Bob comes back out. He's got a backpack and a sleeping bag. And he says, Bob, I'm with you. He says he didn't lecture me. He didn't tell me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. He didn't tell me that I was going to crater and wreck everything and everyone. He just came out and said, I'm with you. He said, when are we leaving? He said, you're going with me. Bob says to Randy, you're going with me? Yeah, I'm going with you. I'll ride out with you. And once you get set up, I'll just hitch and get my own ride back. And, yeah, I'm going with you. Let's go. So they hop in the car. And Bob says this just takes him totally by surprise because no one had ever taken such an interest in him before. And I just want to pause there. I want to pause there for a minute. Do you realize what an incredible gift it is to take that kind of interest in somebody else? Do you realize how many spouses there are who are literally dying in some way, longing for their spouse to take that kind of interest in them, not the 100 other things that they're engaged in? You know how many kids, again, literally dying, engaging in self-destructive behaviors as they wish parents would take that kind of interest in them, instead of in their social lives, instead of in social media and parading their social lives, instead of in their jobs, instead of what it might be. You realize how many people are, again, literally dying. More and more all the time, particularly middle-aged people, who are literally dying, committing suicide, because they're longing for someone, anyone, to take that kind of interest in them, be their friend. You know what kind of gift it is when anybody takes an interest in somebody else. And so they pack up and they go off to Yosemite, and they get there, and it's in the evening, and they realize that they haven't thought about anywhere to sleep, and so they sneak into a tent, a pre-set up tent, lay down in the back in case somebody comes in, they can make a quick exit. Get up the next morning, he starts filling out job applications. Everybody says, no, we're booked, man. It's a busy summer. There's no jobs. They come into the campground that evening, discouraged, but he says it still feels right. He sees El Capitan here, Half Dome there. It's a beautiful sunset. They get up the next morning, and Randy says to Bob, let's climb, man. This is what we came here to do. Let's go climb. So he sat on a hillside. They climb. They get back from climbing, and Randy says to Bob, he says, Bob, I know you can do this, and I'm with you in this whole thing. Let's go fill out a few more applications. And, it's just their loss that nobody's found you yet, but let's knock on a few more doors. So they go knock on a few more doors. And again, the same thing all afternoon. And they come at the end of the afternoon. They sit down on the vendor of Bob's Volkswagen Bug, and he looks at Randy and says, Randy, I think this has come to an end. I think my dream's just not going to happen here. I don't have any money. I haven't thought this through. And this is nothing Randy said. I think it's time to go back home, go back to high school, and graduate. And Randy says, Bob, I know you've got what it takes to do whichever way you go. But if this is what your decision is, I'm with you. And so they go back, and they get to the house. And when they get to Randy's house, he notices what he didn't notice before is that his girlfriend's car was in the driveway, even though it's in the morning. And he follows Randy into the house, and in the house, he sees that there's a whole bunch of presents on the floor, that there are some dishes and some glasses and a microwave, and there's wrapping paper, and he thinks, what's all this stuff? I know that Randy's not moving. It's probably not a birthday. Nobody gets a microwave for a birthday. What's happening? And then he says, I felt both sick and choked up in an instant. I realized that these were wedding presents. Randy and his girlfriend had just gotten married. Randy didn't see just a high school kid who disrupted the beginning of his marriage. He saw a kid who was about to jump the tracks. Instead of spending the early days of his marriage with his bride, he spent it with me, sneaking into the back of a tent. Why? It was because Randy loved him. He saw the need, and he did something about it. He didn't just say he was for me. He was actually present with me. So again, we go back to the question with which we started. Who do you love this fall? Who's really important to you? Family, friends, people in need of help beyond our family and friends. I hope they're important to you too. And are you with them? Because here's what I know, and this was expressed in that very first song. That very first song, you heard the opening song, Africa, which I'd love to see all of you sing with such heart. It says, I love you so much, and there's nothing, even 100 men couldn't drag me away from you. But then right after that, it says, sometime in the future, we're going to do all the things that we've never done. And what's being said there? He says, I love you so much, nothing will drag me away from you. But the reality is, everything has dragged me away from you. And so all the things that I wanted to do because I love you so much, we haven't done. And that's really what this song is about. And that's why he has that verse in there. I'm frightened of this creature that I have become, who says one thing, but does something else. Who do you love? And what does it mean for you to be with them? Because what I know is there are 1,000, 1,000,000 forces that this fall will drag you away from the one you love, and you will not be with them. And instead of reversing that curse and building the kingdom of God and a world filled with love, we'll keep that curse going, hurting one another, breaking one another's heart. And what we want to say real clearly to you is that God is with you no matter what. So many people think that God's mad at them, that they did something a long time ago and never anything bad happened. That's God trying to get me. Nothing could be further from the truth. God is with you no matter what. End of statement, end of sentence. And we're with you. I want you to know that as plain can be. I'm with you. Grant and I, as the clergy of this church, this fall, we are with you. Whatever comes, we are with you. Elliot is there. He wants all of our youth to know that we are with you. Kathleen wants all our kids to know that we are with you. Kevin in music and song wants you to know that God is with you. Miriam in all the hundreds of ways that she helps people. Did you know that Miriam was in church on Friday painting a damaged spot on the wall? If that's not love, I don't know what love is. And the reason that she loves you like that is she wants you to know that we are with you. No matter what comes down the pipe, we are here for you. And we are. And as we go on in this series, Life is a Buttermilk Biscuit, sop it up. And next week we'll have biscuits galore with plenty of stuff to sop up. How are you sopping up? How are you soaking up the people you love in your life? Who do you love? And are you with them? Am I? Amen.